All right, I think we're about ready to get started. This is Dan Garrison from Fresh Start Funding, and I've got John Kenton from LeadQ with me, and we're going to talk today about how to use zero down bankruptcy and the smart version of marketing that to surf the tsunami of bankruptcies. We have a lot of participants today. There's been a lot of interest in this topic. I think we had over 200 folks sign up for the webinar across the country. So I guess it's good morning to some of you, and for the folks on the East Coast, you just hit lunchtime. But thank you for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping issues before we really jump into the substance of things. We are using Zoom, and it used to be I have to explain that to folks, but in this post-pandemic world that we live in, I think most folks are pretty familiar with how this works. We are going to be taking questions and answers at the end of the webinar, and so you can access the Q&A at any point by just pressing the button at the bottom of your screen, logging your question, and then we'll turn to those at the end of the presentation. We also are going to use an interesting feature today at the end of the presentation. Once you've kind of heard about the topics we're going to talk about, those of you who are interested in learning more, we're going to have you raise your hand, which is another button that you can access at the bottom of your screen. This is actually also being recorded, and so if there are things that you'd like to go back and listen to again, it's going to be available. I know we'll be posting it on our website, and I'm guessing John probably will have some way to link this to his website or his blog as well. He's more socially savvy than I am on digital media for reasons that you'll soon learn about. So let me talk a little bit about the agenda for today's presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about critical trends in bankruptcy, and particularly how the world is changing around bifurcation and zero down bankruptcy in particular. We're going to talk about the benefits to your practice of a true zero down filing, offering your clients the option to make payments post-petition for your attorney's fees. And then we're going to take questions and answers and hopefully flesh out things that maybe aren't completely clear to you during the presentation. So I'm going to turn the podium, so to speak, over to John Kenton first, but let me tell you a little bit about who John is. John is a principal at LeadQ Group, which is a marketing agency that we work with very closely. There are a lot of folks out there in this space that will talk about knowing how to market for law firms, and in particular, how to market for consumer bankruptcy law firms. But John's group has proven to be a real trusted partner of Fresh Start Funding. And he's more than just a marketing expert. He's really a bankruptcy marketing strategist. He understands this space better than anybody I've ever spoken to. And he's one of a very few people out there that I think understand how to leverage zero down bankruptcy and bifurcation to really fulfill the mission that we have in mind out there, which is helping yourself by helping more people, or doing well by doing good. So with that, let me turn it over to John, and we'll jump back into my portion of the presentation after John finishes his.
Okay, let's just see if we can get the technology to do exactly what we want.
I just talked about how tech savvy you are, John.
I know. Well, yeah, there we go. So according to me, I'm sharing the screen. If
yeah,
you can tell me that you can see me, that would be great.
You are in good shape.
Thanks very much. So hi, everybody. As Dan said, my name is John Kenton. I've now been working in the sales and marketing industry for 30 years, and I spent my formative time in the tech industry. So I got a lot of my tech savvy during that period, and spent a lot of time in Fortune 100 companies doing strategic marketing and figuring out how to build businesses in that rapidly changing industry. I like to think I finally had enough of the corporate world and managed to escape back in 2006. And from that point, I started my own agency, and really the rest is history. Back in 2007, I started an association with LeadQ, and working together with those folks, we've helped build the successful business that we have today, and have now been working and helping bankruptcy attorneys build their practices for more than 12 years. A little bit quickly about LeadQ. We're not going to go into that in too much detail today, but obviously we'd be happy to speak to you after the webinar. Our business really is focused very much on doing new client acquisition. We do operate for industries other than legal, but by far our largest market is bankruptcy, and it was one of the ones that we found matched our strategy early on. And as I said, pretty much since 2007, we've been running successful campaigns for our bankruptcy attorney clients. Couple of things that makes us different from many other types of marketing that you would see out there. One of the real key things is the fact that our programs are 100% based on pay for performance. So what that really means is we don't charge any money to get started. We don't ask for any commitment, neither in time or dollars. And fundamentally, you pay us when we get results. And if we don't get results, you don't pay. It couldn't really be simpler. The other thing that I think is key for anybody when they're looking for a specific market type of programs is exclusivity. We don't just farm our inquiries and leads and marketing to everybody that's out there. Once we have a client in a specific market, we offer them 100% exclusivity to the area and volume that they can manage. So once we get you, or you get us, more importantly, we're not going to work with your competition. And lastly, we have campaigns now working just as well for large multi-partner or multi-staff firms and small solo practitioners. And we have campaigns running all across the country. So 2020, you know, we could all go on with our stories of what 2020 has done to us. But for so many reasons, we're all glad that that year is over. And hopefully the glimmering signs of recovery that we're seeing in 2021 hopefully continue. So here we're really going to look more about how the bankruptcy world has been affected. And much like many other businesses, as we started to see the full impact of the pandemic start at the beginning of last year, things dropped off a cliff. This is a small snapshot of what happened to bankruptcy filings between March and April last year. So let's just look at that in a bit more detail. This probably won't come as a surprise to many of you, is actually the consumer bankruptcy filings from 2020. And you see what happened after April. The good things, and I know we have to look for good everywhere, that you can find in here is, first of all, after that major drop, when everybody sort of stabilized a bit, things did start to come back. And although it may not look like it, the curve for the rest of the year, flat though it may be, actually represented a trend that is probably not that much different from a typical trend in any given year. It's just that the volumes are lower. The dip at the end of the year, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is really the pretty common holiday effect, where most people tend to go into a certain degree of hibernation financially, as they don't really want to deal with bankruptcies heading into the holidays, which also helps us with our booms as they come along in early Q1s in most year. The little gray bar down here shows you what happened in January, as we just got that filing data in. And yep, we're still running at about 55–60% of normal. So I think what's key when you look at data is bankruptcy filing data is all very well and good, but it is really looking in the rearview mirror. It's telling you what happened. What we try and do is look at what's likely to happen and what signs are of a recovery. So what you're seeing here is data on consumer searches. This is what people have been doing. And this particular one is looking at bankruptcy attorney, i.e. people searching on the internet for that term. Now, the overall shape of the curve still, you know, everything we're going to look at today is going to show that cliff drop in the beginning of 2020. But a couple of things to note here, that interest actually did respond more quickly than you might see in the filing curve that I showed earlier. And although it still doesn't look at it, the actual data in here shows that there's still significant interest in bankruptcy, and the amount of people looking are actually exceeding the number of people filing in terms of their relative volume. So the bottom line here is people are still looking. Bankruptcies have not gone anywhere. They just haven't come to us yet. So let's look at this in terms of the long-term perspective. What we see here is the interest in bankruptcy pretty much since 2004. The big spike there, for those of you that were practicing bankruptcy in the sort of 2007 to 2010 period, was obviously boom times for all of us, as that was the result of the financial and mortgage and banking crisis of the sort of 2008 era. The key thing I think I take away from this is to look more at the relative stability that we've had since 2013. If I mirror that with the actual bankruptcy filing trends, again, our rear view mirror look, you'll see a similar curve. And although there's a variety of socioeconomic data that gets built into why this happens and why the flattening of that curve still seems to be trending down, I think that the key takeaway here is that that level of bankruptcies has been pretty consistent for about the past 6 years, in around the sort of 750,000 to about 800K bankruptcies, consumer bankruptcies every year. Now, why that's key to think about this as we look at our industry and what's been happening is really trying to assess the pent-up demand. So what I've done here is try to show how when we look at 2019 and 2020 compared, we have this gap. The top line shows you the level of bankruptcies from 2019. And actually, it's interesting to note that January, February pretty much mirrored, within a few thousand bankruptcies from year to year. And obviously, then we see the pandemic kick in, and there's our data from the lower line showing what happened in 2020. What we really care about here, obviously, is the difference between the two curves, which represents people that ordinarily, irrespective of any pandemic effect, would have filed bankruptcy. And this represents approximately 250,000 bankruptcies, and that's without considering what's already building in terms of the delta from the norm during 2021. Another thing I wanted to show you, because I think it's interesting as we're positioning both the bankruptcy data, but also looking at how one markets here into this type of space, is this is the curve actually from the campaigns that we run here at LeadQ for our clients. You're going to see the same cliff jump there at the beginning of 2020. But I think from our point of view, and ultimately your point of view, and in fact, I did see a number of our clients are actually listening on this call, is it's been very encouraging that throughout the year, the inquiries and the leads and potential prospects that we generate for our clients has actually climbed back not too far away from where we started the year. Now, again, there's a whole bunch of factors in there, but it does show still that with the right marketing approach, you can still be generating new prospects in a down market. So what now? A lot of people always have asked me over the years is, when's the best time to invest in your marketing? So there's an old joke in marketing circles that there are only 2 times to invest in marketing: when business is doing well and when business is doing badly. Now, obviously, right now, a lot of people would say that, business is doing badly. However, really, when you look at this, it's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for you to gain a greater share of what is a smaller market. If there's ever a time to step up your efforts and get yourself more business, now would be the time. The other thing to think about is in any space, in any situation that you may come across, there are lots of people who are, burying their heads in their hands or in the sand. And many of the firms that are out there are doing the, well, we're going to wait and see, this too shall pass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're not going to do anything different. So for all those people that don't do anything different, it gives an opportunity to those that do to leapfrog their competition. And I think what is key, and what I was trying to show with that graph earlier, showing the pent-up demand, is these bankruptcies have not gone away. They're just sitting there, and people didn't suddenly find money. And in fact, in many cases, it's actually the opposite effect. So now is the time to set up your shop, your practice, to take advantage of the coming demand. So as we were preparing for this meeting, I looked at Dan's slides and I saw the one that he has here that he'll show you in a minute. And I was going to use exactly the same thing. I mean, one of the things that I think we need to do right now, and one of the things that echoes what's been changing in terms of trends for bankruptcy marketing, is to address reality. Number one, there are still people out there who need help. And I think coming soon, there's going to be even more people that need help. And fundamentally, we're in a business where people are calling upon us to help them because they don't have any money, so therefore they can't afford it. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what we've seen in trends, maybe the last 10, 12 years in terms of bankruptcy marketing. If we remember that time when we were in the bubble of the financial crisis, I call that a time when we were in a supply and demand inversion, i.e. the demand actually outstripped supply. In terms of the number of bankruptcy attorneys that were out there. And for those of you practicing at that time, we never had a problem generating people who wanted to file. There was so many out there. Many firms actually didn't have capacity. And in a lot of ways, you didn't really need to do much in order to generate leads. And pretty much if they were breathing, they could become a client. Now, the downside of what happens in any market, not just bankruptcy, when you get that type of supply and demand inversion, is lots of people, and maybe many of you, decided that bankruptcy was a place to get into. So loads and loads of attorneys decided to jump on the bankruptcy bandwagon. And so that caused the next thing that we saw, which was very much a price war. And a lot of people, us included, I mean, we're probably partly responsible too, was recognizing that one needed to market on fixed price bankruptcies and things like that. So that also then drove down even worse to the point where, we saw people doing crazy things like, the $300 and the $400 bankruptcy and all sorts of crazy things. We at LeadQ recognized there was another way of doing things. And in fact, probably for 6 or 7 years now, we've tried to veer away from price and have been trying to focus more on how people can actually pay for their bankruptcy, and have been marketing with a zero down approach, not necessarily bifurcation, for about that long, trying to show how even with relatively little money, you can start a bankruptcy. And now, I mean, Dan can probably tell you more about how and where bifurcation started, but obviously we're now seeing more and more true zero down, i.e., not have to pay everything before filing is occurring. And that's going to be the trend that we're seeing. I think from our point of view, the go forward key, and I would stress to all of you, I mean, please come to us and use our services to help you with this, but it's all really about affordability. From your perspective in your firms, there's really a three-prong approach. Absolutely, we all love cash customers, and if you've got people coming along, whether it's with a tax rebate or stimulus payment or something along those lines, take the cash, file them as soon as you can. Lots of firms do internal financing, and it's not that you actually have to provide credit in any way like that, but it's more, if somebody's going to make payments to you and they're going to make it within a time frame that's okay for them to file, and maybe we're talking 30, 60, 90 days max, they're going to pay in, and when they've paid the full attorney fee, etc., you file for them. That's the other way to go. But ultimately, after that, there's a huge number of people who you can capture by doing zero down with somebody like Fresh Start Funding. So in summary, really, when we're marketing for bankruptcy, and especially with zero down, I think the key is being able to market affordability. We expect that all bankruptcy firms out there are going to be more than capable. They've got the experience, they've got the knowledge, they've got the capacity to be able to do the bankruptcy work. But consumers out there are looking for a way that they can do it and afford to do it. The other thing that we're seeing, and many of our existing clients have adopted zero down, and we're obviously working closely with Fresh Start, and many of their new clients are coming to us to do zero down bankruptcy. We do believe that that over the next coming years, zero down will become the de facto approach. And really, our message to you is right now, learn as much as you can about this and how to market with us, and get on board with the leaders now in zero down programs, both in terms of marketing and bankruptcy funding. And that would be LeadQ and Fresh Start Funding. That's my piece over with for today. So if you want to grow your bankruptcy business, talk to Dan and Fresh Start and myself at LeadQ. And here's my contact details. And I know that Dan and his team will be sending out more information following this webinar. Thanks very much. So
we will. Thanks, John. That was fantastic. And I will tell you that we did a webinar for our clients and prospective clients last fall that was titled, "When Will the Bankruptcy Surge Surge?" And we used a lot of the same data that John just presented to you, and actually some additional things that I think are telling too, that talked about the levels of consumer debt and distressed debt and things like that, that was designed to show you why we believe that there is this deferred demand out there. And there's really two pieces of potentially the tsunami that we're talking about. There is this deferred pent-up demand that John illustrated by the area between those two graph lines. And then there is every reason to expect that what's been going on in the economy is going to increase ultimately the number of bankruptcies that are being filed above those kind of structural norms that have existed in a full employment economy. So regardless of what you see in your crystal ball in terms of volumes, we know that things have got to get back to normal here pretty quickly in terms of bankruptcy filings. And so that's really the key we're talking about. So let me jump into my piece of the presentation. Let me get the screen share back here. All right. So what we're going to talk about in my section of the presentation is the benefits of true zero down filings, and really talk about what John addressed as a true zero down or bifurcated solution for clients that offers them payment terms. Before I get into my piece, I'm going to do the same thing John did. I've always thought it's important to know a little bit about the person that you're listening to, and to judge the credibility of what you're hearing based on that. So I'm one of the co-founders and managing director of Fresh Start Funding. Fresh Start Funding is the nation's leading solution for financing tied to payment terms for consumer clients. And we're heavy in the bankruptcy space. We actually do work in other consumer areas too. I am an attorney by training. I've been practicing for between 25 and 30 years now. I formerly was a partner at a couple of national and international law firms, and my practice area was primarily corporate restructuring, but I also owned a consumer bankruptcy practice for a good chunk of that time, and had folks that were practicing in Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. I had my own firm, the last stage of my legal career, that was kind of a boutique practice doing the corporate restructuring work, and then we had a branded consumer practice called the Turnaround Team as well. I was fortunate to be recognized a number of times nationally for the work I did in corporate restructuring and turnarounds with companies and so forth. And I've also had the opportunity to publish, speak, and I also teach at my law school. I teach law practice management and leadership. So that's a little bit about me. So let's talk a little bit about what Fresh Start Funding is. Fresh Start Funding is a company that was founded by attorneys for attorneys. We currently work with over 500 firms now nationwide in about 46 or 47 of the 50 states. We've still got a few we haven't cracked that we're always looking for. And we've funded over 6,200 cases in the last 3 years, many millions of dollars worth of financing for attorneys to facilitate them offering payment terms to their clients. And really, we're driven by a cultural value of doing well by doing good, which I've already spoken about in the introduction. The idea here is we want to provide you a solution that helps you to grow your practice, but to grow it for all the right reasons, because you're offering solutions to people that otherwise wouldn't be able to access the justice system, or particularly to access it with the benefit of a capable attorney like all of you who are watching us today. So as John noted, there are two real problems that are going on in the country right now. There are still many people, even in this depressed kind of period for bankruptcy filings, that need the help of bankruptcy, and we have every reason to expect that's going to go up. And those folks are simply too broke to afford bankruptcy. The idea of coming up with $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 to pay to get into a bankruptcy when folks are at their point of highest financial crisis is really kind of a nonsense proposition, we think. The traditional system doesn't recognize the realities that exist for people out there in the world. There are national stats out there that all of you have seen that talk about the fact that even the average household, which probably has an income above most of the prospective clients that you deal with, doesn't have enough cash on hand to put new tires on their car or to replace a broken water heater in their house, let alone to come up with a couple of $1,000s to file a bankruptcy case. And so we think that true zero down bankruptcy is the solution. The idea that folks don't have to come up with any cash up front in order to get the relief that a Chapter 7 filing provides for them, and to get past this, this point of financial crisis for them and get them that fresh start that the system really promises. So how does that work? Well, we believe that every client ought to be given the option to choose whether or not they pay upfront for the bankruptcy. So as John said, when folks have tax refunds or stimulus payments, or if they can find the cash somewhere, they've got a little bit still in the gas tank, that they have the choice to do that, but that they also be given the option to choose a bifurcated or pay over time solution where it doesn't cost them anything to literally get their bankruptcy filed, get the stay in place, and start moving towards their discharge, and then be able to make payments over time. Now, those of you who've been practicing for any period of time recognize the legal challenges to doing that with a single pre-petition engagement agreement. And that's really part of what we offer, is the know-how to do this legally and ethically. So how does it work? Well, when clients choose a bifurcated solution, you sign a pre-filing services agreement or pre-filing engagement agreement that calls for you to prepare the minimum documents necessary to file the case. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to still do your 707B diligence. It's critical that you make sure that someone's eligible to file, make sure that Chapter 7 filing is in their best interest, or bankruptcy filing at all is in their interest, and make sure that you've uncovered all of the potential landmines that may exist out there for them in terms of undisclosed assets, potentially preferential transfers, fraudulent conveyances, property that someone else is holding for them, all the typical landmines that we've all seen in practice. Notwithstanding the fact that you do the diligence, though, most folks who offer a zero down solution actually defer the preparation of the schedules and statements until after filing, which all of you know is allowed under Rule 1007 of the bankruptcy rules, which provides that the schedules and statements can be filed up to 14 days after the bankruptcy filing has actually been completed. And typically, attorneys who offer a bifurcated solution offer the pre-petition services that they provide for $0, which means essentially they waive their fees for pre-petition services. Because we all know that anything that you're owed as an attorney in the pre-petition environment that's not paid becomes a debt that's dischargeable to the bankruptcy, just like any other creditor. So once the bankruptcy is filed, then what we have folks do is come in and sign a separate post-filing agreement that contemplates you completing all the rest of the work in the case and sets a fee and potentially reimbursement of filing fee and costs and so forth for doing that. And then you move forward with preparing the schedules and statements, and you complete the case in the ordinary manner. Fresh Start Funding provides a number of services that facilitate this, because there are some practical challenges to offering a bifurcated or a zero down solution for your clients. One is that if you're waiting to get paid your fees in your Chapter 7 cases, and particularly if you're advancing filing fees and other costs, it's a big strain on your cash flow. The other thing that we talk about, and we'll spend a little bit of time analyzing, in a later slide here, is that it imposes a big administrative burden on your practice in terms of managing the payments that your clients are going to make. And I'll tell you, under our program, folks can make monthly, bi-monthly, bi-weekly, or not bi-weekly, bi-monthly, semi-monthly. My mom always used to have to explain to me the difference between semi-monthly and bi-monthly, but even weekly payments. And so we'll talk about mathematically the burden that comes out of that to manage the payments. And then we provide you with marketing know-how and the forms and so forth that you need to keep up with best practices in bifurcation based on the case law that's developed around the country about this solution. So I already alluded to this, the idea that payment management is a very big deal. And it's actually one of the things that we're very proud of doing very, very well for folks. We use what's called a relationship-based payment management approach, which is essentially, we're not like a collection agency. What we do is we work very directly with and communicate with the debtors about what's going on in real life for them, and try to build a relationship that fosters, their payment performance. But let's talk about why that's such a critical need for folks that offer payment terms to their clients. Many of the attorneys we work with take on, 10 new cases each week. Once they get the benefit of the marketing bump that is innate for zero down, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, they see their practices expand. And so 10 new cases each week. That's 480 cases plus per year. And if they're doing monthly payments, that's close to 6,000 payments that you have to administer. If they're doing weekly payments, multiply that by 4, and you're talking about having to manage over 20,000 payments per year. And I will tell you, even though we're very good at getting the payments in the door, it's not always the case that the first time we draft a debit card or a bank account, that the payment comes through smoothly. And so ask yourself, if you have the know-how and the staffing to be able to make the phone calls and do the communication to gently shepherd these folks back into performance on their payment plans. We're very good at that. We have the economies of scale to accomplish it. And so we take that headache off of your plate and make it our challenge instead. And it allows you basically to do what you do best. So we, among the various philosophies that drive our business, we have a very strong philosophy around highest and best use, which is you ought to be doing the thing that you do best, which is practicing law. And you ought to be able to leave the payment management burden to someone that specializes in that, and that's who we are. So let's talk about what it means to have a complete zero down bankruptcy practice. And I'm going to give you some case studies here in a few minutes that illustrate the power of different approaches that you can use with zero down as a tool in your toolbox. We provide a lot of marketing support and try to teach bankruptcy attorneys how to position their firms for success. And we offer tools like the flawless Chapter 7 bankruptcy consultation. We provide sample ads that are, constructed with the best practice advice of folks like John, Kenton, who know really what they're doing. Tools like the dynamic fee calculator. There's actually a real opportunity with zero down to potentially get yourself back to a more reasonable fee. John talked about the price wars out there that exist. And in a lot of markets, I can tell you that there are attorneys who are practicing in the Chapter 7 space that also do domestic and immigration work and whatnot. And where they're getting an hourly rate for their time, the rack rate might be $250, $300, $350 an hour. And when we help them analyze what they're getting effectively in Chapter 7 practice under the traditional model, it's not uncommon for them to be making less than $100 an hour for the work effectively. And that's because they've commoditized themselves by competing against other attorneys for a limited share, in the market of folks who can't afford to actually pay up front and who become very price sensitive. And what offering payment terms does is it liberates you from that. It takes price off of the table for folks. And so within the bounds of reasonability, both under Section 329 of the code and the ethical rules, you have the opportunity to get more value for your services. And we can tell you from experience that consumers are happy to pay more for a pay over time solution because for them, that's affordable. And what I talk about, when I speak on panels and give keynotes and things around this is that affordability for those of us who have the cash to pay up front is solely about price. But for your prospective clients who don't have the cash to pay up front, affordability is just as much about, and in fact, more about payment terms than it is about price. And so where you could potentially get your effective hourly rate in Chapter 7 back up into that $250 an hour range, you're going to be pleasantly surprised by the fact that folks are happy to pay a higher overall price for Chapter 7 bankruptcy when they can make affordable weekly or biweekly or monthly payments over the course of 12 months. It becomes much, much more affordable, accessible, approachable for them to do that. Plus, as I've already alluded to, we offer best practice support. So we have worked with National Ethics Council. We have engaged in litigation around the country with the U.S. Trustee Program to kind of vet the terms of how this should work. And all of our documents that we provide to you as part of our program really represent the very best thought about how this is done legally and ethically, and how you can avoid the landmines that otherwise might be there if you tried to do this yourself. So we provide pre and post filing agreements. We have a Form B 2030 or Rule 2016B disclosure of compensation form that really kind of fleshes out exactly what's going on in a bifurcated practice where you work with a third-party financing and payment management company like Fresh Start Funding. We have advice about Schedule J and a whole lot more beyond that. So let's talk about what that does for your firm. Really, there are some key pieces here that you need to understand. And John can attest to this and already kind of has alluded to it, that where you fold zero down into your practice, you are going to retain more clients. And the two case studies I'm going to present to you will illustrate two different approaches to doing that, and how one that really is comprehensive is just an explosive, has an explosive growth impact on your firm. But the simple fact is, on average, attorneys are able to close engagements with about 50% of the people that consult with them. And we see, if nothing more than just offering, the zero down solution in a consultation, we see that go from 50% to 75 or 80% almost immediately. And that's because, whether you know it or not, the folks who walk out of your office thanking you for your time and telling you that they need to think about this a bit, they're leaving because of money. They're leaving because they can't figure out how they can afford to hire you. And a lot of them are embarrassed to tell you that. But once you have that solution, the relief washes over them. They're happy to hire you and have your services. As I've already talked about, you can secure higher fees. And of course, this is all, again, within the limits of reasonability of 329 and within the ethical rules, but we can show you how you can actually get higher fees in cases by offering a pay over time solution. And then working with Fresh Start Funding, again, solves the problem of your cash flow when you're offering payment terms. So if you tried to go this on your own, you'd have to have the capital to be able to float payment terms to people, and you'd have to have the infrastructure to manage payments. And Fresh Start Funding helps you with both of those. Okay, so I want to give you a couple of real examples. And like the old crime shows, I'm going to tell you the names have been changed to protect the innocent. We're not going to disclose, who the actual clients are, but I can assure you these are real case studies of people that we have worked with, and they're kind of typical of what we see. So Amy needs to retain more clients. She typically sees 5 new clients a week, does 5 consultations. And like most attorneys nationwide, about half of her consultations end with a client signing an engagement agreement with her. And her average pay upfront or pay now fee is $1,800 for bankruptcy, which is right in line with the national average. And so her practice earns about $18,000 a month. And from that revenue number, she has to pay her rent and pay her staff and hopefully pay herself something at the end of the day. Amy signs up with Fresh Start Funding, and we jump in to help her retain and keep more clients. And what results from this is that she goes from 50%, engagement rate in her consultations to about 80% engagement rate. What that generates for her is 2 extra clients per week. And she doesn't raise her price. She doesn't fold this into her marketing. Literally all she's doing is just presenting the zero down option when she consults with prospective clients. But she goes from $18,000 a month with these marginal engagements to $28,800 per month, which represents 60% growth just by offering this option in her consultations. And I will tell you, this is the simplest version of folding zero down into your practice. And these are real typical kinds of results that we see across the country working with hundreds of firms. Now, I want to contrast Amy's situation, which is perfectly fine. If that's what you want to do, is just have this in your toolbox and offer it as an option, but not really market around it, I am positive that you're going to see an increase in your business. But let's talk about David, and what David does differently is kind of key to understanding the explosive growth. So David's practice is very much like Amy's to start with. He earns $18,000 per month. He begins marketing with zero down, really folding it into everything he's doing. And what that does is amazing. We'll talk about that in a second. He also sees the opportunity to raise his average fee a bit because he's offering a pay over time solution. So every time he signs up a client, he's going to actually make a little bit more money than Amy does. So what happens? Well, a couple of things that generate 8 new retainers a week for David, because he starts out seeing 5 clients a week as well. The results of his marketing are more robust. And I think John can attest to this, that once you fold the zero down messaging into the marketing, you're going to actually generate more consultations than you were before. And then on top of it, you're going to close more of those consultations into engagements the same way Amy did, but you're starting out with a larger pool of prospective clients coming into your office to begin with. And that is the key difference. He multiplies his practice in a couple of different stages of the funnel. And the net effect of that is that he sees his practice grow to $69,000 of revenue a month, which is 284% growth over what he was doing before. Now, David, by doing this, takes on a big challenge that I've already kind of described, which is he now has 1,152 monthly payments that he's got to manage. But with Fresh Start funding in place, he does that without a single headache on his part. And, I've talked about our approach to managing payments. Let me tell you a little bit about the results. So Clio, which is a company you're all generally familiar with, international company in the law firm management and technology space, they do a lot of surveys nationally to try and figure out what's going on in practice. And one of them happens to focus on attorney success in collecting payments. And in the bankruptcy space, year after year, they have concluded that bankruptcy attorneys collect about 72 cents on the dollar when they try and manage their own payments. We're collecting north of 90 cents on the dollar for our bankruptcy clients. And so that marginal difference alone more or less pays for the service that we provide. But when I talk about payments being managed without a headache, I'm not only talking about not having to do the administrative work within your office, but I'm also talking about much, much better results than we've ever been able to see law firms accomplishing on their own. And it's because we have the economies of scale, we have the technology, we have the know-how, and we have a compassionate approach to doing it, which just naturally helps folks stay on track with their payments. So a lot of you were probably already thinking, how do I get started with this? So we have a team of practice consultants that work with us that understand how to fold this into practice. And from the very first contact you have with us, it's going to be a consultation, really, where what we do is a personalized practice evaluation. We try to get a handle on what your practice looks like right now. And for a lot of you, it probably looks a lot like Amy's and David's did before they started working with us. But we'll help, kind of get a finger on the pulse of what's going on with you and then figure out where you want to go and how we can help you accomplish that. Once you decide to sign up with us, we actually do what's called a lunch and learn. We buy lunch for your entire office, and we have training videos and materials and really, a hand-guided process to get this folded into your practice and explain where you need to change forms and processes and things to really incorporate this. And we have a really heavy focus, candidly, on the marketing, and encourage our clients to talk to John about how they can really juice up their marketing, because we'd like to see more of our clients adopt David's approach to things than Amy's, because that's where the real explosive effect of this happens. And the beautiful thing, as I've already kind of spoken to earlier, is that you do better, but you do better because you're helping more people. You're offering your services to folks that couldn't otherwise afford to hire you. There isn't any ongoing commitment with this at all. So there is a very small onboarding fee that you get back with the very first case that you send us to take a draw on your financing with us. And you can use us or not use us as you see fit. There's no term commitment. There are no minimums or anything like that. We're here to help you grow. And for the folks that really take advantage of that, we end up having a very robust cooperative relationship, but you don't have any commitment to us. So as John did, I am going to give you my contact information. We're going to follow up with everyone here to make sure that you've got John's and our contact information. You can go to www.freshstartfunding.com. We have an extensive library of resources there. We have what's called Fresh Start University, which can really help educate you about more of these topics. We've published nationally, have copies of articles. We have recordings of webinars that we've done in the past that you might find interesting. You can also just give us a call at 800-915-6545. And lastly, here's the last thing that I'm going to offer from this point in the webinar forward. If you've already concluded that this is something that you ought to know more about, and I suspect that many of you have, whether it's interest in John's services, interest in Fresh Start Funding services, I'd like you to raise your hand in the webinar, and our practice consultants will make sure that they circle back to you with the highest priority. We'll get back to you within the next couple of hours to find out what questions you have. Or if you're ready to get started, we'll talk to you about the program in more detail and get you going. And so with that, I think we're going to do some question and answer. So let me stop the screen share here and let's pull up the Q&A and see what we've got. All right, so Stuart asks, with the slowdown in bankruptcy filings, the U.S. trustees around the country have more time to undertake more diligent scrutiny of individual cases. This includes what I think is a renewed interest in bifurcated cases. What do you think will result from this increased regulatory scrutiny of unbundled or bifurcated cases? Okay, so I'll take this one because I think John will probably concede I know a little bit more about this space. So we offer a defense guarantee and an indemnity as part of our program in the bankruptcy space for just this reason. This is a change to the way that bankruptcy is being practiced. And even though there is great case law support out there for this, and there's a lot of guidance about best practice, it's new. And so it does naturally get attention sometimes from the U.S. trustees or for judges. And so what we offer is that if you get an inquiry from a U.S. trustee saying, hey, what are you doing? You know, it looks like you're charging a bit more, or the structure isn't familiar to me. We step in, and I'm actually National Litigation Counsel for our company. So I literally get involved. I have another attorney that works with me that helps with briefing and writing letters and so forth. But we step in and protect you there. And that includes everything up through potentially motions being filed, even appeals of adverse decisions. And in the unlikely event that you are forced to reduce fees or disgorge fees, or there's some other problem there, which I will tell you very rarely if ever happens, we also offer an indemnity up to $50,000. As we've grown, we're sort of victims of our own success. So we have 500 or more firms nationally now that operate in this space. And so we do occasionally get inquiries. And I would say I have about a 50% success rate when I write letters and just explain what's going on. Things just go away. And then the rest of the time, you know, sometimes we'll have motions that get filed and we jump in and do the briefing. We've gotten really good results out of that. And so far, there has not been a single case in the country come out and conclude that you can't bifurcate. There are a number of cases where, you know, there's been a clean bill of health across the board. The disclosures have been good. There are some common mistakes that attorneys make in this space. And every time that we end up actually briefing issues and talking to judges about this, it's because attorneys have made mistakes. And we have a robust training program to try and keep people from doing that. But we'll talk about what those, you know, kind of missteps are that can generate the scrutiny. But we're here to protect you. Daniel asks, I've recently had contact with several personal loan firms that have agreed to lend money to the client post-filing of the skeletal petition, but before completion of the schedules. This is post-filing debt. This allows the client to pay fees plus interest instead of elevated attorney's fees. Client has the option to pay more quickly and avoid the interest instead of paying a set amount of attorney's fees. Could be less expensive. Is this not an alternative approach? Yeah, sure. The problem that you have with bankruptcy in particular, though, is that it's very difficult for these debtors to get any sort of financing post-petition. And there is also a relinquishment of control over things so that you don't know what's happening between yourself and your client, and there are potential ethical issues that you've got to be careful about when you basically connect them with a financing source. I haven't had any experience seeing anything like this in the market, and I suspect that it could be a lot more expensive, because the difference with this is that we set folks up on 12-month payment terms. Often it takes them a bit longer to pay off the balance than 12 months because we work with them as their situations change. That doesn't cost you anymore, and it doesn't cost them anymore. And in typical consumer financing, there is default interest, and there are late fees and transactional charges and things like that that tend to eat up a lot more of the client's money than perhaps you're led to believe up front. So I'd be careful about that. This is a comprehensive solution that you're fully in control of and you understand what's going on with your client. Edward Kelly asks, do you have state-specific information about trustee issues with bifurcation? Yeah, sure. Yeah, it looks like he's in Oklahoma. I was actually just talking to a panel trustee in Tulsa this morning. So we've got a good finger on the heartbeat of what's going on in different states, and we can certainly answer questions for you about that. John, very few questions for you.
Okay, never mind. I know. I mean, obviously, the situation with bifurcation, there's a lot of technicality to it, and even given the discussions that you and I have had with people at NACBA and various other things over the last few years, there's still a lot of explaining that needs to go on. So that's fine, not to worry.
Yeah. So we, a big part of what we do, besides educating attorneys, is also trying to educate trustees and judges. I mentioned that we publish quite a lot. Before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of speaking across the country. I've had an opportunity to do a few CLEs across the country via Zoom since then, talking about the technical issues, as John said, and also the ethical issues around it. I can tell you that the conversations around bifurcation have changed markedly over the last couple of years. Around the time I published my first article in the ABI Journal about the history and practice of bifurcation, there was a decision out of the District of Utah called Hazlitt that really changed the national conversation. That was a case where an attorney bifurcated and was challenged. The judge gave the practice a completely clean bill of health. And it actually led Cliff White, who's the executive director of the U.S. Trustee Program, in a speech he gave to the National Association of Bankruptcy Trustees, to commend that decision, not only to the bar and the U.S. Trustee Program, but to the community at large, as being a great roadmap for the do's and don'ts around bifurcation. And I have lots of conversations with trial attorneys and assistant U.S. trustees across the country when they have questions. And to a person now, they are saying, we're not against bifurcation. We're concerned about how it's done. And candidly, that's one of the big reasons to work with a company like ours, because we do have a finger on that national pulse. We have a seat at the table in these conversations. And I'm the one who's actually out there answering the questions when they come up in different districts. And so, getting that best practice support that we talked about is really key. Sam asks if we can fund the filing fee as well. And the answer is yes. So you pay it post-petition if you advance it for clients. And so we can fold that into the financing. Let's see here. I don't want to keep us going forever, so I'm looking to see if we've got some questions. Oh, here we go. Hey, John, you're going to love this one.
All right.
An anonymous attendee says, hi, John, to all attendees. I highly recommend John Kenton and LeadQ. I was a Chapter 7 and 13 attorney in the Pittsburgh area for 17 years before meeting John at a NACBA convention in Cleveland. I was at Cleveland too. And I recommend it highly unless you are from Western Pennsylvania, LOL. I'm not sure what the inside joke is there.
No, that's where he practices. Therefore, he doesn't want anybody else that's using it. But actually, that's okay because obviously we are exclusive. So whoever that person is, we know each other. We're not going to have anybody else that's going to compete with you. So thank you very much for that.
So I think we'll kind of wind up here. Let me give a couple closing thoughts and give John the opportunity to say a couple closing things too. But I think John is 100% right that as well as we can rub our crystal balls, we know two things. One is that at the very least, we're going to recover to normal levels of bankruptcy filings, and there's a lot of deferred demand out there. But there's also every reason to think that there is a lot of increased demand that's going to hit over the next couple of years as well. And I think that the folks who have gotten beaten up by COVID are even more likely to need a pay over time solution than perhaps has been the case in the past. The other thing that I feel real strongly about is that bifurcation and zero down, at least until and unless Congress decides to change things. I mean, if Elizabeth Warren's bill goes through and attorneys' fees for Chapter 7 are non-dischargeable or become an administrative expense, our company still has great work to do in that space, but the notion of bifurcation will no longer be necessary. But until that happens, a zero-down solution with a true bifurcated engagement agreement is going to become more and more the norm in Chapter 7 practice. And I know that because the attorneys who adopt it see the power and the demand and need that exists out there for it. So we'd love to work with you, help you grow your practice, and really do well by doing good. Let's get out there and help the folks that need us most and can't afford us. John?
Yeah, I mean, I would be more than happy to have what I generally call a multi-beer conversation, even if it's only virtual, with whoever would like to discuss the state of the industry and marketing in general with respect to legal practices and bankruptcy in specifics. But one of the things I did want to key into what you were saying there is it really is not a question now of, I mean, other than you said, if there were major changes in legislation regarding bankruptcy, which nobody sees in the short-term future anyway, it is a question of when, not if, the surge is going to hit. As I showed earlier, we have the pent-up demand for people that were already in trouble. And we still don't know exactly what's going to happen with the current stimulus packages, but all sorts of things, not least of which would be, you know, the issues regarding rent and unemployment, and all of those things are currently keeping people just tottering on the edge. But at some point, that's going to go away. And I think that we know that people who are being challenged right now are doing what everybody does at any of those times, is it's all going on credit cards, right? As much credit as they have, it's going up. And at some point, it's going to come due. Now, hopefully, as many people as possible are going to be able to go back to work, and they're going to be able to afford to pay it down, and great. But we know that not everybody is. So really, it is a when, not an if. The other thing that I think is true, and is true pretty much of any business, not just bankruptcy, but what I was talking about in the past, is these type of times when you know there is a future market to be had, and you are as close to certain about that as possible, now is the real time to start investing in how you're going to capture your share of that and hopefully make that as big as possible. It may not come tomorrow, but it's going to come soon, right? So you're better off being in a position where you've got everything set, ready to take advantage of that, rather than look in the rearview mirror and hear from all your other friends and attorneys that it's happening, and hey, look at what I'm making now because of everything I did in the past, and then you're playing catch up. So that's the real message. I did see one question from one of the participants here asking about pricing. Yeah. It's a little involved to go into right here, but we're going to be sending out follow-up contact information, as Dan said. I'd be happy to talk to anybody that wants to know exactly how the program works. The only thing I will say at this point is, we do have, just like Dan does, actually, we do have extremely advantageous ways that our payments are structured, and it makes it essentially cash flow positive, especially if you're working with a zero down program like Fresh Starts, because of the way that they will give you a certain amount, the money up front, even if it's a bifurcated program. So we are all about affordability, just as we recommend you be with respect to your clients. So thank you very much.
Great stuff. All right. Thanks, everyone, for attending. We had fantastic attendance. One last reminder, press the raise hand button if this is something that you want to get in a conversation about right away, either because you're convinced it's something you ought to consider, or you just have questions and want to know more about it. As John said, now's the time to get up to date about what's going on in this space. And now's the time to incorporate it into your practice if you want to be ready as things start to shift back to normal, and potentially much more robust than normal in the bankruptcy space. But thanks again for your time today. It's been a pleasure doing this for you, and we look forward to helping you do well by doing good.